Hi, everyone. This is Maheen, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we're having a no fluff conversation about the reality of Canadian innovation. While we pride ourselves on being a startup nation, we still face a sobering truth in 2026, which is that our world class intellectual property and talent are increasingly ending up abroad because we struggle to scale. Joining us is Adam Froman, the founder and CEO of Delvinia, a veteran technology entrepreneur. Adam is an award-winning innovator and a former board member of the Council of Canadian Innovators. He is here today to discuss why Canada builds startups, but really global category leaders, and what practical changes we need to make to keep up with our economy value at home. So without further ado, let's dive in and welcome Adam. Adam, it's a pleasure having you on the show today. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Maheen. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. And Adam, as I mentioned in my intro as well, we'd love to address and open a discussion by understanding the scale-up gap. Canada has such a high rate of startup creation, yet we rarely see those companies grow into global category leaders. Tell us, why do Canadian startups really struggle to scale or sell early instead of growing globally?
Well, for me, this is a lived experience with Delvinia. So, I sold to a US acquirer. And, afterwards, the question I asked myself was like, did
Mhm.
Canada help me build a global business, or did
Mhm.
it just make it easier to sell one? So that's
Right.
been my kind of question that I've been, since we got acquired in 2021.
Mhm.
Um, But the big things for me are really, we've been so good at startup creation, and we've been, particularly strong in doing research and building research ecosystems and building incubators. And I had funded some research with the Innovation Policy Lab at the Monk School of Global Business, and really, what's happening is the majority of Canadian firms are selling out before they really see scale. So that's been a problem. And it's not really necessarily by choice that people are looking just to exit. They're really, seeking that next stage of growth capital that they want to find and help them continue to scale. And it really just hasn't been in Canada. So, when a foreign acquirer ends up acquiring your business, you end up losing, your intellectual property, your talent, and ultimately, and what I think is, while the founder will do well, we lose a lot of that long-term economic value for Canada. So, for my own personal experience, having gone through this, I look at it and say, we really need to change the focus from just the startup community. And we've been preaching this through the Council of Canadian Innovators for over 10 years. We really have to be focusing on the scale up community.
Mhm. There's no doubt that turning a startup into a global giant, it really requires a shift from just creating to aggressively owning the market, which seems to be our missing link. Now let's explore how policy and economic pressures are impacting growth stage companies. Please tell us, how do Canadian policies and capital constraints limit companies from scaling globally?
Well, I just recently wrote an op-ed, really talking about a speech that Pierre Poilievre gave at the Economic Club. And so while I don't have a partisan view one side or the other, what he's been talking about is like reducing bureaucratic barriers and, reducing taxes, which is really from someone who's an entrepreneur is a great thing for all of us. But at the same time, it doesn't give you the whole picture. And it doesn't solve necessarily that structural gap and capital gap for scale ups. So on the other side, the liberal agenda has been much more about, supporting and funding innovation and then supporting foreign direct investment. So I look at it very much as that it's somewhere in the middle of those two. And policy is such an integral part of helping Canadian companies grow. And it's really about where our government, whoever is in power, and right now it's the Liberals who just turn their minority into a majority, about putting a stake in the ground and saying we need to create scaffolding around these companies and we need to really help them, grow.
That is a great overview, Adam, in terms of looking at that if our policies don't incentivize long-term domestic growth, we are essentially subsidizing the innovation of other nations. Next up, let's look at protecting Canadian talent and intellectual property. Please tell us, why is Canadian talent and IP moving offshore, and what does it mean long-term?
Well, I think the long-term thing is that as we lose our, if, as foreign companies acquire Canadian companies, the intellectual property goes out of Canada with that company. Ultimately, the talent starts working for that international group. And, historically, it used to be the brain drain story, where, people would leave. But now I'm seeing what's even a greater challenge is you can remain in Canada and work for the global company without a problem. But this creates a branch plant. And if we're not creating, maintaining and holding on to our intellectual property, and creating wealth here within the companies and keeping people employed working for Canadian companies, then the long-term economic view is not very strong for Canada. And ultimately, especially in the technology space, we won't have an environment where we can actually keep growing companies in Canada competing on a global scale. We'll just be overrun by foreign companies serving Canada, and that's not a good thing.
Right, right. Well, that is a great overview. And you're right. I mean, protecting our technology sovereignty is not just about pride. It is really about ensuring that the high paying jobs and tax revenues of the future stay in Canada. And to all the high growth founders and tech leaders that are watching us in 2026, building a company in Canada is quite the act of resilience. But as Adam points out, we cannot win globally if we keep selling our best assets early. So please don't just build to exit, build to dominate. Our economic future really depends on leaders who are willing to scale their vision on home soil. Next up, Adam, let's explore navigating global instability and rising competition. Tell us, why has the scale-up crisis become more urgent in today's global economy?
Well, it's troubling for those of us, particularly the trade war with the US, because if you are a technology scale up, the first place you really go to scale your business is south of the border. And if we're having troubles doing that, then it creates such a great challenge for expanding outside of Canada. So, what we need to look at is this vulnerability around the trade wars. And we're so intertwined with the US, we can't allow it to be a sort of what I consider a trade weapon with us. So if we're really not focusing on expanding our business and really helping our companies grow in Canada and focusing on servicing a global market from Canada, that trade war issue is just going to end up dominating and really starving our companies. And then there's the other side of that is that whole geopolitical argument around keeping IP at home. And, being able to invest in IP with Canadian companies, and as they reach that scale, having the capital markets and our government really kind of stand beside our companies and maintain the intellectual property growing. That's really where the wealth comes from, is really commercializing and scaling the intellectual property. And we have to keep that at home. So, with the instability going on, it means is such an important time right now to really, bring the wagons around our Canadian firms that are trying to grow, trying to scale, trying to take it beyond just Canada, and really helping them continue their journey of being long-term, economic supporters of our economy.
Right, right. I really like how insightful you were throughout this interview, Adam. And in such a volatile global market, a country that only exports startups and talent will quickly find itself at a severe economic disadvantage. So thank you so much for highlighting that here. And finally, would love to look at building or how to build a practical roadmap for a global scale. Please tell us, what practical changes can help Canadian companies scale and compete globally.
Well, the two things that are driving at this is really, it's not a founder problem or a founder failure that this is happening. It's really a policy failure. So we have to deal with the policies. And the other is that people and a founder shouldn't be forced their hand to make a decision whether they want to remain Canadian or whether they want to sell outside to a foreign investor. So the three things that I really think is really, if our government policy really focuses on scale up, that will be the first. And up to
Right.
now, our government talks about it, the policymakers reference it, but if you really look at the track record, there's been very little done at really focusing on our scale ups. The next one is really around procurement. And there has been talk about procurement, but the importance about procurement is this is a huge lever for government to really stand behind our Canadian companies. It wasn't that long ago that government really said that they can't show preference to any company or a Canadian company over a foreign company when they're making their procurement decisions. These are policy decisions that really need to change, especially with the times that we see now. And the third one, and what I think is a huge one, is around intellectual property. So it's the policy
Right.
decisions around how do we support intellectual property, how do we maintain intellectual property, and how do we continue to scale intellectual property. And the discussions of this announcement of this sovereign fund leans towards that way, but it's still kind of unclear of what's going to happen.
You're right. I mean, implementing a scale first framework is quite the only way to transform Canada from a startup incubator into a global powerhouse. This was a great conversation with you, Adam. Thank you so much for being so detailed and thorough. As we wrap up now, what advice would you give founders that are choosing between selling early or building in Canada?
Well, I think it's really around your access to growth capital. So if you are able to have a infrastructure around you to not have to sell out too early, and that the growth capital is there to support your growth without over diluting, I think it gives you the option to be able to remain Canadian, because the longer you can hold on to being a Canadian company, the better you will be in the long run in both helping support the future economic prosperity of Canada, but ultimately, if you don't keep growing, you're going to stagnate, and other companies will come and sort of starve you. So you have to keep on growing, but it's really around focusing on, set up, and it takes a while, but set up a strong capital structure around you where you have access to capital at the different stages, in particular at scaling.
Right. That is quite a powerful reminder that most valuable thing that you can build is a company that outpaces even your own expectations. But this was great. Thank you so much, Adam, for your time today and for being for sharing such great insights and your expertise. Thank you.
Thanks, Maheen.
And listeners, I was Adam Froman from Delvinia, a masterclass in the scale-up crisis, intellectual property protection, and why Canada must rethink its innovation strategy to win in 2026. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca for more resources. To learn more about how we are supporting the ecosystem, please visit Canadian SME Small Business Foundation at smefoundation.ca. A special shout out before we leave to UPS and ADP, our HR partner, for their ongoing commitment to empowering small businesses across Canada. Please keep moving forward, and we'll see you in the next one.